here thinking about Mark's question. And I grew up as an analyst. I reflect back on my experience over a few decades of work. And I especially can reflect on some internal discussions we had when I got up, thanks to Mark, and working with Mark on Capitol Hill. And while I think it's a very valid question to talk about what are you trying to achieve and what is the ultimate goal, I guess my issue is that I go back and I think about the introduction of Tom Finger. And it wasn't the last sentence that said, "I'm proud to introduce Tom Finger." It was the 5 or so minutes before that that a young analyst, Brian, stood up here and talked about a vision. And really it's what it was. But it was a little more than a vision, actually, because the grassroots of what start out to be a vision is already embedded in the community. And my first problem is that if, in fact, we want to go and answer the question that was asked, you almost have a built-in, another built-in question, or at least another built-in assumption. And I don't want anybody to take this wrong. I'm not putting words in Mark's mouth. But in my mind, you kind of start with a built-in assumption. That built-in assumption is that everybody that's in leadership positions today in the intelligence community, from middle managers on up, and everybody that's in the National Security Committee or community, and everybody in Congress, and everybody else is smart enough to come up with that answer at some level, at some point. My problem is, having talked a lot, especially recently, to young analysts, I'm convinced in many ways I'm not as smart as they were when I came into the into the community. And it's not an issue of what you can learn or what you can do. It's an issue of the philosophy of how you go about doing it. And one of the things that I talked about at the beginning of this was the neat part that I found in that there were natural collaborators. And while I am very cautious, and I agree with Mark and others, that we have to be very careful not to confuse collaboration and opinion with experience and analysis. That doesn't necessarily mean that in today's information-heavy world that type of collaboration and that type of networking and that type of reaching out to networks well beyond, in many cases, what I think we could do in the past, in part because of policy, in part because of technology, doesn't lead to experience and analysis. So I guess my problem is, in some ways, I don't want to see the question of kind of what's the end game as a systems type of question dilute from the fact that you've got a young, energetic workforce that's ready to charge, that there's a lot of concern, consternation, and otherwise, not that they're going to get hired away by industry for money, because I got to tell you, most of the ones I talk to, they're just like they are when I went into the intelligence community. It's not about money. It's about purpose. It's about national security. It's about patriotism. But isn't it frustrating that in a world where there are questions, including by Congress, including questions that Mark and I can remember very distinctly, by the way, when Mark and I first got up to the Hill, And we had one member of the committee who was convinced that we could increase national security and save the intelligence community a lot of money were we just to spend half as much as we did on satellite programs, not even half as much, a quarter of as much as we did on satellite programs, and invested in more cameras for CNN. And it was hard to argue with him. Not because, I mean, I could argue with him from an analytical standpoint, but he was kind of convinced. And I think for a period of time, what I saw after the Cold War is an intelligence community who ran around, you know, kind of after their tails, asking the question or crying out to still be relevant. And it was the oddest thing. And I used to talk about this with a lot of people. It was the oddest thing. Because the question, I'd have people from the intelligence community coming in and saying, we need to explain our mission. Here's what we're still doing even though the Cold War is gone. And my problem with that was, in my mind, the mission has never, ever, ever changed. The mission is about figuring out plans and intentions of individuals or organizations or whatever that mean to do us harm. The mission is, as Mike started out, is preserving the peace. Because that really is the goal of the intelligence mission. That's the fundamental flaw in the psyche of the United States of America from its foundation. And that is, we have this idea that intelligence is a wartime function. And it's not. In fact, if we get into war, that in some ways is an intelligence failure. And I'm not talking about WMD, and I'm talking about the coexistence of intelligence and policy that leads to educated policy decisions that hopefully prevent crises. But that's kind of a tangent. I want to go back and finish with where I started. If you want to know the end game and the goal and everything else in my mind and what it's really about, with all due deference, sir, don't waste your time asking Mike Wertheimer. And certainly don't waste your time asking me, or I would argue Tom Finger. Ask the half dozen or so young analysts here who are really doing this and know what they want and know that you know, it is frustrating to do things better at home than you can do at work from a technology standpoint. And by the way, I agree, this is not about this is about analytical tradecraft, absolutely. This is about technology, but this is also about security. It's about acquisition. I mean, this is the fundamental driver. We talked about analysis leading collection. My mind, it's analysis leading transformation across the board. And I think that's where we should be. And it's just an intuitive sense. It's my analytical sense. It's my 30-plus years of analytical background that leads me to that piece of analysis. So I would encourage you, that's the right question, but I would encourage you to ask the right people. Ask Brian. Ask the young lady that's going to introduce Tom this evening. Ask them kind of what they're doing, how they're doing it. Ask Claudine. Yeah, at heart. Anyway, let me get off the soapbox, but I feel if I didn't feel as passionate enough about this, we wouldn't be here right now. But I do think this is hugely important, and I do hope you will engage. And Mike gave you some good ways to, he challenged you in ways that are uncomfortable. I mean, for some who, you know, remember I had the dinosaurs and the bipeds up here? A lot of the dinosaurs probably are used to talking about end-to-end solutions. Something that we're all going to have to face. Let me get to the meat of what I was going to say so you can all get out of here. First, Mike mentioned that the site, the reference that was up here, that the site would be up for a couple weeks. It's actually going to be up for a month. And then it is my understanding, unless we've changed our mind, that after that site is up for a month, then that information will be transferred over to the DNI website and will reside there. on the unclassified side. In terms of this evening, well, I'll get to that last. Some people have asked me about the pages, the one-pagers for September 13th that were down in the lunch area, and a couple people didn't get them. We had 500 copies sitting down there, and they're all gone. All right, so perhaps somebody took more than one copy. But just a little piece of either speculation or analysis, I'm not sure which. What we're going to do is we have all of your emails, because when you're registered, we asked you for them. And in fact, you know, that was part of the requirement, so you can get to October 11th, which I'll talk to in a minute. We will, on Monday, send out an email to all of you with that page as an attachment. So if you did not get that one-pager, you will have another opportunity. So look for that to come out by close of business Monday. We already talked about, Mike already talked about being able to see the site now and being able to save stuff onto your computer starting on Monday. Within the next 2 weeks, you will get an email from INSA on the October 11th session. Only the people that registered and attended Chicago will get this email. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you very quickly to with a click of a button, re-register, yes, I'm coming on the 11th, or no, I'm not. And quite frankly, I'll be very honest, the only reason we're doing that is we have to judge how much food we have to have, because it's a working lunch. So I would ask you to look for that email in the next 2 weeks. Please re-register. The requirement is you have to have been in Chicago and heard what was talked about in order to come on the 11th of October. So look for that. I have had several people ask me about an attendee list. We don't normally do that. Now, let me tell you why. There are a lot of people who, quite frankly, are happy to be here, but near as I can tell, also are registered in hotels in 3 other cities and 4 other states and things like that, you know, because, hey, you want to keep moving. So what I think we're going to do is you will also, in one of those emails, see some instruction on how we're going to handle that. And the way I think we're going to handle that is we're going to look to see if we can, either on the INSA website or on this other website that you saw, we'll see if we can create an ability for you to post your information for sharing if you want to be part of an attendee list. And that way it's your choice, and I don't have to deal with people who don't want to be, do want to be. You'll have that option, and we'll go forward from there. So look for those instructions as well. And I do think it's important, because the other piece of this, one question I've been asked as well, and I think it's a question that you should ask again on October 11th is, this is great, we're meeting a lot of people, some different people here we haven't seen before, how do we keep this going? And part of it is the October 11th session and the feedback, but you know, the collaboration among this group in trying to help analytic transformation, I think, also becomes important. So that's something else to talk about. All right, last but not least, the reception this evening will be right outside those doors in the hallway. It'll all be set up, and that's where we will convene, I believe at 6, is that right? Is that what the schedule says? At 6 o'clock. Dinner will be right in this room. I would remind you that the reception and dinner are business dress. The only time I'm going to make you wear a tie. So it is business dress for this evening. And that's all I have. There is one person, though, that I would like to introduce who you haven't heard from, but a very, very important player for INSA. And he would just like to close the conference with a couple of thoughts. So I'd like you to help me welcome John Brennan, the chairman of the INSA board.
Thank you, Tim. seems kind of strange to think that after 2 full days of discussions, we've just scratched the surface. And I think we really have. And this afternoon, there were a number of very interesting questions and issues that were raised that really get to the heart of the intelligence mission. But I think one of the reasons why we just scratched the surface was demonstrated by Mike and Tim in terms of the affliction that many of us share, which is that intelligence is in our blood. And there are no shots and no pills, no prescription that will get it out of your blood once it's in your blood. And having been associated with the intelligence community since 1980, I don't want to get rid of it. And I don't think a lot of people in here want to get rid of it because the stakes are so high. What I do want to do is to, on behalf of the 30-person INSA board, and I must say that 1/3 of those are sitting government officials, the rest come from private sector and the academic community. And I've been very privileged since May of this year to be chairman of the board, is to tip our collective hats to the people who were able to put this together, and put it together in a very short period of time, quite frankly. And it was a collaborative exercise between the Office of the DNI as well as the INSA staff. And there was a lot of hard work that went into this. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't recognize that work. I think it's clear that the Office of the DNI really put forth a tremendous effort in terms of Tom Finger coming here twice, Mike Wertheimer, who has been sort of the zealot in this effort, and rightfully so, Tony Spadaro, Ross Feinstein, Brian Drake, who has been the wizard behind the screen, taking care of the online questions, Amy Che, the INSA staff, some of the folks that are back in DC right now, Christina Dobard, Hannah Powell, Charlotte Gallagher, and the people who have been working this here, Frank Blanco, Rebecca Thompson, Jason Kello, Jared Gruber, and then Rachel Patrica, who has been here since Saturday and has been doing just heroic efforts as far as making sure that everything went forward smoothly. And a conference of this size, that's no easy feat. And then also Tim for arranging this and putting this together. As I said, after being in the intelligence business for close to 30 years now, transformation is something that has been talked about a lot. And to get to Mark's questions as far as the end state, there's never an end state. I think Rodney Ferrone said yesterday, it's continuous improvement. There's going to be a transformation conference that will be held somewhere in 5 years. It'll be one in 10 years. It's a continuous process of just making sure that the intelligence business of this country is second to none and is first rate and is as unerring as possible because the stakes are so great. So I'd like to thank you again on behalf of the board, all of those in the private sector from the government that have come together to demonstrate the strength of the partnership and the importance of that partnership for the future and security of this country. So thank you again. Look forward to seeing you tonight.